looking at where a lot of the chunk of this money is going, where it's been allocated. So, of course, we'll be coming back to look at some of those. But economist Odhiambo Ramogi is with us in the studio today. And a very good morning to you.
Good morning, Du.
It's budget day.
Indeed it is, and it's interesting to see you this side of the studio.
I know.
Where there's too much light. I'm used to the other side.
It's the magic of the broadcast.
Exactly.
Karibu either way. And you know, even though we look at the numbers, we can still get your mind to go a little bit where we ask you to interpret a proverb. Why not?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So today we're in Guinea, bauxite. Think aluminium or aluminum, depending on whether you're in the US or Britain. They're rich in oil, diamond, and gold. But let's go to the proverb. The river never drinks its own water. So the river never drinks its own water, and the tree never eats its own fruit. How would you interpret it?
I think in all the years I've been to the Situation Room, that's the best proverb I've heard ever. It means you're not the beneficiary of your life capacity or goodness, as it were. Your kindness will be felt by others. Your goodness will be felt by others. So that then you become a river from where the rest of humanity can enjoy a drink, and you become a tree from where the rest of us can see fruits and enjoy those fruits. I'm a biblical Christian, and we believe that a Christian must have the fruit of the Holy Spirit, and you are not the beneficiary of that fruit, it's other people around you.
You know, as well, one would say, one person who benefited from that tree is Isaac Lin and gravity.
You had to bring in gravity at some point.
At some point, looking at how things fall, for sure. You talk about beneficiaries, you talk about fruit being shared. You could liken that to the budget and how we're looking at it today. Kelly Boss has just given us those numbers. We're looking at who gets a lion's share.
Right.
And then maybe who doesn't get as much of a lion's share of the budget. Now, education is a big one. But then also this is happening at a time where education seems to be in a bit of a headwind with other things. Do we actually see that this 700 and so odd billion shillings that has been allocated to education actually is feeding the sector?
Well, I have a lot of comments about this budget, so I will try and control myself to minimize or say the one which is asked. The education sector rightfully should receive a lot of investment because it ensures that there is a continuation in our country. It ensures that we build capacity. It ensures that the young people today are able to participate in the labor market globally, competitively, today and tomorrow. And so the budgetary allocation, the high budgetary allocation is on point. Yes, it's in fact necessary. As regards our allocation in the education, the problem is no longer do we have sufficient budgetary allocation. The problem is the measurement, is where the money going really, having the desired results on one end. On the other, is the allocated money going where in fact it should go? If you look at the amount of money that we've given the Ruto administration for education since coming to power over the 3 years, it's now close to 2 trillion.
Yes.
And the question we always ask ourselves is there something to show for it? That, yes, we've put in 2 trillion in this sector. Now, let me just break it down the way I would in my mind. Of the 700 billion, about 400 go into paying teachers, salaries of the primary school teachers and the secondary school teachers. Capitation comes to around 115 billion. This is 1,400 per primary school child,
Yeah.
and 22,244 for every secondary school child.
On paper.
On paper.
On policy.
Policy, that is what they said they are going to use that money for last year when they asked Parliament for it. Now, there are about 10 million primary school children and about 4.7 million secondary school children. And so you add that up, we come to about 115 billion going into capitation. Then one wonders, why would the Ministry of Education communicate to head teachers, I think a few weeks back we saw it, that they are only going to give them 91 shillings for capitation for school equipment when you see that the budgetary allocation is actually sufficient. So then that is why I still retreat back to my initial point, which is the problem is no longer budgetary allocation.
Okay.
The problem is measurement. The problem is follow-up. The problem is the money allocated really going to the people it's meant for? And you come to see and investigate some of the reasons why the young people are up in arms in the secondary schools. Partly is because I saw a video of them complaining about the food they eat, complaining about the living standards, and etc. I mean, some of them don't even have basic needs like water. They have to go to the river a kilometer away to get water and then come back to land. And so for me, I think that's the major question as regards education. Of course, there is money going to the university students. Again, help is there, but there are many university students who are still at home waiting for their parents to sell land so that then they can attend, university education. Again, where is the money that is supposed to facilitate them to go to school?
Odhiambo, another area that has received a big boost would be healthcare and security, right? But let's focus on healthcare. And when we talk about healthcare, a healthy nation is a working nation, pretty much. Without a healthy nation, even the taxes that are being levied on individuals would not be able to, because we don't have the energy to do all that, because we are a sick nation. But then again, you look at the allocation that goes there and the problems that we have in the health sector. Do they match? Services that wananchi get as well?
Let me first of all say that the allocation is in order. I saw Rigathi Gachagua's alternative budget proposing that we increase our budgetary allocation for health to 300 billion, up from what the Ruto administration has proposed, which is 175 billion. On paper, it sounds good, but then there's a technicality. Health is majorly a devolved function. So now what we remain with at the national level is the national referral hospitals, namely KNH, and I'm not sure, but I think Moi Teaching as well. Now, that puts us in a pickle. If you allocate 300 billion, are you going to tell the counties how to use this money, or are you going then to spend this money on behalf of the county government? There's a legal conundrum there that Rigathi's proposal created. That said, let's now look at what is proposed and whether, in fact, it is able to do what is expected. At the national level, we expect the national government to lead in policy. We expect the national government to lead in training. We expect the national government to lead in investment. We expect the national government to lead in pandemics. And so, as regards the scope of what the national government is supposed to provide in the health sector, I'd say that amount is sufficient.
Okay.
Perhaps even more than sufficient. But then again, the question that is begging is, Are we doing some of the functions that county governments are supposed to do? And let me explain. The national government is now the one coordinating purchase, procurement of drugs and equipment. This is a bit problematic because the law anticipated that a county government in Kakamega or a county government in Garissa will be able to organize themselves and ensure that there are drugs for their people, ensure that there is equipment for their people. When the national government takes up this function, political considerations come into play. And we say that health is too important to be left to political considerations at the national level.
Yeah.
And so when you now have to make political considerations, did the people of Garissa vote the government of the day or not? You are subjecting those, you are permitting those people, you know what, you can just die because you did not vote for us. And so for me, I think that is one of the problems. The other problem I foresee is there's a lot of mismanagement in the health sector, especially as regards SHA. SHA generates an additional 148 billion annually. Now, if you add that to the 175 billion, we have sufficient money to ensure that Kenyans are adequately taken care of as regards universal health coverage, because SHA is supposed to provide for service delivery. You hear me in the list I gave, there was no service delivery, as it were. But there's a lot of reports of mismanagement of SHA. There's a lot of reports of mismanagement of that money going into private accounts. In all honesty, and with all humility, I think CS Duale has demonstrated to us that the national government can also be, can equally be incompetent in managing our health, as well as the county government. And perhaps just to finalize on that, you know, in 2013, 2014, when the county governments first came into power, there was a debate. Why did we allow our health to be devolved to a smaller unit of government? But you look at it now, I think that debate is settled. Because whether it's national or county, it's more about the leadership than it is about the level of...
But we equally can't talk about the allocations that have been given to health sector and not talk about the registration of individuals through SHA who as well contribute to that kitty. Because what you're seeing is what has been allocated, the exchequer will give their part. Right. But here we're talking about what then Kenyans are contributing to the same and how that then would contribute to funding healthcare. And as well, the millions of Kenyans who are registered and are not paying. So should these be conversations that we are having at this particular moment, especially when it comes to healthcare?
Yes, indeed. I had mentioned that SHA is generating around 148 billion. Now, if we streamlined that properly, because there are complaints that the system asks poor people to pay more than it does richer people with more sufficient income. So if we streamlined that, we expect that that system should be able to generate upwards of 200 billion. And that is additional money coming into play. The people who are not able to pay for SHA, surely it is a possibility that they have no income. And then we should find ways and means of cushioning them. Because you see, if an old man of 82 years old is dependent on the Kenyan government to give him 2,000 shillings every month for sustenance, how do you expect this old man then again to look for money to pay for SHA and you not covering him? I think one of the conversations that we need to have actively is the people who are registered, that they are over 80 and should be automatically entered into the SHA system so that then we cushion them in that fashion. But beyond that, it is an opportunity for Kenyans to contribute towards their health. It is a great opportunity for the Kenya government to collect additional money for service delivery. Yes. If well managed, I think it can get us where we need to go.
And yet, it seems that it's not well managed. If we're talking about the budget, then it's very clear that there are certain holes here and there. The conversation about whether things have functioned, whether we looked at education, whether we looked at health, which are critical services for which a budget is being created to see how you're going to fund them. And so the question marks then are already coming up. So then if we look at something like security, defense, whereby the very front lines and corridors of the nation ought to be protected, do we see that there is a lapse in its performance vis-a-vis the money that is being allocated in this budget?
A sitting president is on record saying that a third of our budget goes into corruption.
Yeah.
And it's properly documented, it's properly budgeted for, it's budgeted corruption. And so what you're saying essentially is there a possibility that there is a lot of wastage in our budgetary or in our public financial management system. And this wastage then is affecting service delivery as is expected or as is budgeted for. And the answer is yes. We've seen this in education, we've seen this in health, and as you've rightly pointed out, we've also seen this in security. Security receives a lot of money, and every time you have an issue, you are asked, weka mafuta, weka pesa ya mafuta, so that now we can pursue your matter.
And that budget should cover for all of these things.
It should.
The mafuta included.
It definitely should.
Okay.
Ama nunulia askari credit.
Yes.
Sababu hii maneno inakaa, we need to make several phone calls. And so some of those things are not met, yet are budgeted for. And so I think the gap majorly is a governance issue. And so more conversation. You know these reports that the controller of budget gives 3 months in how we've managed budget, 6 months in how we managed budget, 9 months in, and that should be a very, very important conversation moving forward, because then it tells us whether, in fact, the money that was allocated for a certain function, we have what we call a program-focused budget, whether the money that was allocated for a certain program, in fact, did what it was supposed to do. Because you find, yesterday I heard that State House spent about 4 billion, which is unplanned for, after planning for themselves 27 billion. The question is, where did this 4 billion come from? Which sector, which program, which service was affected by such a decision? And so for me, I think the real issue, the real crust of it, our budgetary allocation as it is right now is legally sound, economically apt, and even scientifically in order. The bigger question is the follow-up of, was the money used properly on one end, and two, was the governance principles upheld?
Ramogi, you know, we find ourselves in a confusing situation. You know why? Because we look at allocations that have gone into infrastructure and development, which has dipped. Yet every other time whenever we borrow, the law says you borrow for development. That means infrastructure should have seen a huge allocation, because that would spur many other people to start businesses, and by virtue of doing that, then economy would get more through taxation. Right. So when we look at development, infrastructure pretty much getting lower allocation in this budget, but then again, even when you're going to borrow the 1.something trillion that should ordinarily go into development, what exactly are we saying? What exactly are we saying when even KRA says, the government says, we want to expand the tax bracket, but you are not giving allocations that would help you expand the tax bracket?
You've reminded me of a question your colleague asked, whether small businesses mean more taxes.
Yes.
But we'll come back to that. It's interesting that you framed your question as regards infrastructure and not development. And I'll tell you why. The way lawyers define development spending and the way economists define development spending, two different things. For us, salaries for a doctor that is stationed in Lodwar is development spending. Because what we are saying is that the community there now has health facilities closer to them, and it's not just a facility, it's a facility with a resource person, it's a facility with equipment. And so the lawyer would define the construction of the facility as development spending. The economist will describe that construction, the drugs, the equipment, and the salary for the doctor as development spending. Now, who writes the laws? It's the lawyer. So you find many times we are at loggerheads because a lawyer would imagine that brick and mortar development is, in fact, development. An economist believes that development into expenditure, into seeds, into fertilizer, that ensures that there is food security is part and parcel of development spending. And so the legal threshold of development spending might need redefinition and might need description, so that then we come to a point where we agree, yes, when we spend more on agriculture, it's in fact development spending. But now to come back to your question, which is why infrastructure should be lower. The reason why infrastructure should be lower is because the law allows for borrowing against infrastructure. It does not allow for borrowing against salaries for doctors in Lodwar or in Garissa. So then, as the person now allocating resources, you say, let me allocate resources to this core function and then borrow for infrastructure because the law allows me to borrow for infrastructure. So it makes sense why they would do that just so that they meet the requirements of the law.
So to maybe try to avoid the impalatability of corruption as an overt practice in budget making, because a lot of what we say from across society is that budgeted corruption is one of the issues that we have. That's why we can't actually be sure that all 758 billion shillings goes towards education, for example.
Yeah.
So we choose to say that maybe there isn't an understanding of what ought to be done. That when you say 758 billion shillings ought to go towards education, that 758 billion shillings actually goes towards education. So maybe there's too much work. Maybe there are too many lines to cross. Maybe there are too many children.
Right.
Maybe there's too much too much of a need in terms of infrastructure. Are there any other reasons as to why 758 billion shillings in the year 2026-2027 would not go towards education?
Yes and no. Overarching, budgetary allocations are the aspirations of the government of the day as to where they want to put their priorities. And so you put your money where your eyes or where your mouth is, as it were. I'm
Literally.
not sure yeah. However, there are usually challenges. One is when you overshoot revenue. You expected that you will get a lot of revenue, say 2.5 or 3 trillion revenue. And then what you get is a lot lower. And so there is the budget that is read and is allocated, and then there is the reallocation that happens across the year as they say, what is most important, what is most, what is most urgent. And then that one gets funding and something else does not. Again, the other overarching reason why would be delay in donor funding. Sometimes you make budgetary allocations because a donor has told you, we will give you money. And then a president like Donald Trump comes to power and says, no, we will not give you money. And then now you have to readjust your budget to make room for such an eventuality.
Why would you budget on something that you do not have?
Yes.
But that is what a budget is. It's futuristic. It's futuristic.
But if you make, I'm sorry, Ramogi,
Yes.
if you budget with your salary, you know that your salary is 50 shillings. So you budget based on what you know you have coming in.
Right.
And perhaps where I'm going with this question is, should we not get to a time where you actually budget with what you know you have so that you don't run into the situations that you're speaking of?
That would happen if we have sufficient surplus for, say, 10 years, and then we save that surplus, and then now we start using that surplus to budget, as opposed to budgeting against revenue, against appropriations in aid, against donor funding. But as it is right now, we do budget with expected revenue in mind. Appropriations in aid, you go renewing your driving license. That is budgeted for. We do budgeting with in mind with donor funding. So a budget is futuristic in nature, and that is a reality. And donors' funds will always be put into play, because if then the money comes and there's no budgetary allocation for it, the Treasury has resources that it cannot spend. His hands are tied. He has money, but he does not have the legal vote to use that money. So it has to be in budget, so that now by the time it comes, he knows this money needs to go immediately. Now, so the second reason is the donor funding delaying and or not coming at all. Now, coming to the real issues, which is the education sector, we have in history, not too long ago, seen instances where an education officer registers a school in his county. And the school has a board, and the school has accounts, bank accounts, and the school has a motto, and school uniform, and even some pictures, fictitious pictures. But the school is non-existent. The school is nowhere to be found. And so there are instances where inspectors find this out, and of course that money is reallocated. But the major reason, and even that one, I know the way it sounds more like a governance issue. The major reason is corruption.
Yeah.
Where now someone just redirects funds that are meant to help the public or in the service delivery to their own personal use.
Ramogi, you just mentioned something that I think I want to understand, maybe our listeners and viewers want to understand better, that we overshoot our revenue targets, you know? So here we are, we know exactly where we are, that we put a target of budget of 4 trillion, we know we are going to collect 2.8, you know. Why is that the case? You know, because many would say, if I know my revenue is 2.8, 2.9 trillion, can I work with that? Then with the deficit that is there that I know I will borrow and everything else, I can use that because the law allows me to do that. But are we intentionally overshooting so that we can budget corruption in there?
Interesting question towards the end. So first of all, I need to clarify between overshooting revenue and budgeting beyond revenue.
Yes.
Overshooting revenue is, you know that, for example, in 2025, you received revenue of 2.5 trillion. And now you overshoot and you say, I'm expecting revenue of, say, 3 trillion. But it's not clear where this revenue is coming from, or your forecasting is not properly scientific.
Yes.
And no forecasting is properly scientific, really. But then again, there are usually some economic shocks that come into play. Some revenue expected through exports do not materialize because maybe of some war or some eventuality. And so for this reason, then you receive less revenue than forecasted. So that's what we call overshooting revenue. But what you're really asking is us budgeting beyond our revenue, expected revenue, which is we are budgeting for 4.8, but our revenue is 2.8. Well, first of all, they are saying that the deficit is around the deficit around 5%, which is about 1.1 trillion. So it's still within healthy means. We expect it to come lower than 5%. But budget, lower.
Yeah.
Really, our expectation is that the deficit must come lower than 5%. Right now, it's around 5% plus change, but now we expect that it should come lower. The challenge we are having is they are making very large budgets, and so the deficit, which has traditionally been there, looks smaller, but because of the bigness of the budget, but the deficit is not reducing as it were. Now, governments generally must budget beyond revenue, partly because of appropriations in aid, partly because of donor funding, and partly because governments must borrow. I don't know how to put it, but governments must borrow. There are instances where central bank does not, like the national government does not need money, but central bank needs to borrow.
Why?
Monetary policy. It's called mopping. You just go into the market and you find that there's too much money in circulation. And so you go mopping it.
What would be the indicators of too much money in circulation?
Inflation.
Okay.
So that then when there is, after elections, ordinarily, because our politicians dish money during elections, around and after elections, there's usually too much money in circulation. Central bank, whether the national government wants money or not, central bank must come and mop that money through treasury bills or treasury bonds. So governments must borrow. I don't know how else to put it.
Well, even taking that into consideration, governments must borrow, but at the same time have fiscal responsibility when it comes to ensuring that the borrowing is pinned to a project that makes sense.
And that is why now the budget beyond their revenue, so that what they borrow, find somewhere to go. The Japanese used to even to pay you to give them money when there's deflation, pay you to borrow from them. But that is a different case altogether. And so because of that, then you'll find that budgets usually must be larger than the revenue anticipated.
You know, we're talking about the budget, the funding of the same, the winners, the losers, and what needs to be done. But let's touch base with the Noah Kipkemboi, who is at the Treasury building. Good morning, Noah. How is the weather there? Is it cold today? Last year you complained about it being chilly, but what's the situation like? What's the mood outside Treasury?
Good morning, Aseto. It's relatively cold, you know, but nothing uncommon. Very cold Nairobi this beautiful morning. Quite interesting. Lots of activities right here at the National Treasury. Planning, you know, it is a national occasion, so red carpet has been laid at the entrance. It's a whole occasion, reading the budget for the financial year 2026-2027. But this place is quite historic when you talk about Treasury and what happens here. When you go back in time, actually it's quite interesting that this ministry was introduced in 1954, and this was under the constitution known as the Oliver Lytton Constitution. Just came in after the Mau Mau uprising, and they needed to calm things down. And one of the things that they did, Oliver Lytton, who was then the Secretary of State for the British colonies, decided that we need a constitution in Kenya. And that's how this ministry was established as the Ministry of Finance and Development. Today is known as Treasury and Economic Development. So things have shifted, and since then, post-colonial, we saw the first minister coming in, African minister, that is James Gishuru, served between 1963 to 1969. And right now we are on our 15th minister, CPA John Mbadi Ngongo, who is actually expected this afternoon to come down with the ceremonial briefcase to say that this is how we're planning ourselves for the upcoming financial year. So right here, things are quite calm, but we are expecting. Earlier on, we saw the actually the PES, that is Dr. Chris Kipto, just walking around, supervising the place, making sure that everything is going as it should in terms of preparation. But it's pretty chilled, just as the weather has settled. So are things down here, even as we unpack the numbers touching our budget 2026-2027. Back to in studio.
Thank you very much, Noah Kipkemboy. We continue to touch base with all our reporters out there, making sure that we bring you up to date with regard to the budget statement. And do.
Yeah, sure. So, of course, still continuing our conversation with Ramogi Odhiambo, economist, this morning, and just looking at what will be the it seems that we seem to think that something different may happen when the budget statement is read at about 2:30, 3 o'clock this afternoon. But the folks who've been putting this together for the last 9 months seem to be very clear about what they've said. This is how much you have. This is what you need to do. Right. This is where you're going to get it from. This is how you're going to spend it. It doesn't look anything different from what happened last year, 2025 going into 2026. But if you want to have a progressive economy, it seems to me that these actions that we're looking at today, what has been happening for the last 9 months, then need to change.
Yeah, I think we have adopted the incremental budget approach where you just adjust upwards a little bit. This year we've adjusted it by around 2.7, I heard you say, just 2.7%. So, and that's why I was saying that our budget making process is legally sound and largely scientific. Mm-hmm. You just get what you already have and you see how can you expand it and you move forward. And then treasury departments, just like central banks, are generally usually very conservative. You'll make noise, but what they have put their mind in terms of this is what we want to do is good. So just pray that whoever is there really is visionary and aligns their operations with the with the national vision, or the Vision 2030 in our case, or whatever vision will be there beyond 2030. So that would not necessarily change. If you want significant change, I think the person that I saw was non-conservative and very rugged in his change approach was Kamau Thuge when he came to Central Bank. Because beyond that, before that...
Odhiambo, let us listen to what FCPA John Mbadi is saying.
Public participation and public knowledge. Today is not maybe in the 90s or early 2000 up to 2010. Yeah. The budget estimates, the revenue raising measures are with the public from 30th of April to date. What maybe Kenyans will be listening to is the details of these revenue raising measures and budget highlights. So there is really no surprises, just giving more details on what it is that is in the budget estimates and the finance.
This is your second budget as the Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury. When you look at your first budget and this second budget, how difficult or how easy has this one been?
Well, there is no easy budget. In fact, this year's budget is even informed by a number of challenges, one of which is the external shock that we are facing. You know, now we have a war in the Middle East, and that war is completely disrupting the world economy. And so we are preparing this budget in the backdrop of a major external shock, what is close to be called world war. And so there are a lot of uncertainties, and again, underperformance in revenue collection, the rising inflation. That's a major thing, because we are preparing a budget at a time when the inflation is rising. Last year it was different. Inflation was contained. Today it is rising. So this budget is more challenging.
All right, for a lot of Kenyans, they'll be looking at some of the food commodity prices that will be brought down. But the question that I want you to know, in terms of the sectors that could generate a lot of economic activity, a lot of jobs, are you doing something around that?
Yeah, of course, we are investing quite significantly in agriculture as the backbone of our economy. Remember, agriculture is also largely devolved. And I think that is also something that we are missing in our discussions when we talk about underfunding agriculture. Agriculture is heavily devolved, but the government is coming up with interventions to support a number of crops, both for food consumption and exports. Like tea, you can see in the past 2-3 years, government has invested a lot in the tea sector. We have also invested a lot in the revival of the coffee sector. We have invested a lot in edible oil, and I will speak to that in Parliament. We have also invested a lot now in sugar reforms and many other crops. But again, in food production, you can see the efforts that the government has put in terms of subsidy, fertilizer subsidy, provision of seeds has helped us in increasing the quantity or the amount of food or maize, which is our staple food. The production of maize has gone up. Well, we have also been lucky that the weather has been favorable, but the government intervention is clearly visible and evident.
All right, so
Waziri.
Okay. When you look at just looking at the funding of this budget, revenue underperformance is still a major headache.
Yeah.
What is your plan around that?
Revenue performance is still a big challenge, and it is informed by a number of factors. One of them is the inefficiency at the KRA that cannot be wished away, but there have also been some challenges in terms of tax administration. I will point out that our tax administration has challenges because the business has moved from the normal traditional way to more into again informal sector, and besides that there has also been the movement towards the digital economy, and so we are doing a lot of reforms. In the supplementary budget that we prepared, we had allocation for KRA to do reforms, to carry out reforms, about 17 billion. And a lot of reforms are happening at the KRA. And I'm sure then in the next or the coming financial year, KRA will be able to collect more without raising tax rates. And if you look at my finance bill that I presented to Parliament, it's heavy on reforms and tax administration as opposed to raising tax rates, contrary to what others have been saying. Yes, my friend.
Waziri, thank you very much. I know you touched a bit on agriculture. There are quite a number of votes that have been seen to reduce allocation when we look at supplementary one and this particular budget. Agriculture is one of them. You're cutting almost 10 billion shillings from there. Energy is one of the major cuts also that you've seen, almost 72 billion. Can you talk to us about this? But education, actually one of the biggest bumps also on the other side, are getting a huge, allocation. Talk to me about this balancing act that you have to consider when you're making this particular budget.
We have tried to maintain most of the provisions under the agriculture sector, no major cuts. I will tell you, in the fertilizer subsidy, we have maintained almost the same amount of 18 billion. We have also maintained almost similar amount in sugar reforms at 2.5. Yes, we have reduced a bit. Parliament actually cut the coffee cherry, but I think we need to put a little more on the coffee debt, because that is where money is needed. We had provided for 1 billion was cut from the coffee cherry, and I thought it would be put under the debt, but Parliament in its own wisdom decided to reallocate the fund elsewhere. We are also putting more resources in providing coffee seeds, and so we have not really underfunded the agriculture budget. But energy, you are right. Energy, we did an assessment, and we came to a conclusion that a number of projects and programs, this is a zero-based budget. We have started implementing zero-based budget where you justify every shilling that you are asking from the national coffers. So when we looked at the energy sector, we realized a number of projects are actually commercially viable, and that is why we started the National Infrastructure Fund. So we have taken them out of the budget, not that they are not going to be funded, but they are going to be funded differently by applying the National Infrastructure Fund and PPP program. So
Definitely.
the energy sector will still be funded heavily, but away out of our budget.
And lastly, from me, Waziri, we talk about the issue of Tax Procedures Act. Lots of changes right there, especially this movement from zero-rated to tax-exempt. And one of the areas that we've seen with the current government is the issue of affordable housing. There's been proposition now, we are moving them from exempt to, rather from zero-rated to exempt. And some people are saying, is this counter administration, which is actually very forward with issues to do with affordable housing?
No, far from it. My finance bill is working more towards simplifying tax collection and making it efficient. Let me put it this way. Yes, that provision was put there to attract more investment into affordable housing sector. But you also have to review. When you have a tax expenditure like that, you continuously review its performance. If it is not adding much value to the economy, then it has no business being left, because it's an expenditure. When you have Kenyans claiming for taxes, it is us who pay for it. Those of us who probably are not even involved in that business. So we have looked at the value being added, and there is not much value. But two, there is a problem. There is a problem in the sense that administering that provision or that tax expenditure is very difficult, and it is causing a lot of leakages. Now, if you say that cement, for example, for affordable housing, you will not tax, steel, etc. How do you determine? How do you separate? How do you ensure that the cement that has been bought is actually going to affordable housing and is not going to current to put up my house? So those challenges we are trying to eliminate by removing zero rating and taking them to exempt. We are not going to tax them, but we put exempt so that there are no claims, because there have been unnecessary claims that don't make sense at all.
And how about EVs? Because we've also seen a lot of focus on EVs.
We are saying we should move as many items as possible to exempt and not zero rating. The exempt are also, they are not paying tax. The only thing is that they are not going to claim input tax. And this allowing of input tax claims is creating a lot of problems, because then you allow all kinds of unscrupulous people to come forward. And by the way, if you look at our medium-term revenue strategy and tax policy, national tax policy, it is clear on what we need to do. And it is clear on the fact that we should remove most items from zero-rated to exports. We should only allow export commodities to be zero-rated. We have left some under zero rating still, because they are very essential and very sensitive, like bread, like milk and the rest. But ordinarily, almost all items need to go to either exempt or vatable at the standard rate. Zero rating is not the right thing to do. It creates tax expenditure, it creates tax leakages and tax planning, which is not very good.
Thank you very much, Azir. Okay.
All right, of course, that is the CS Treasury, John Badi, as he was getting into Treasury building this morning in preparation for the budget reading that will take place later on. And here in studio, just getting into our final comments with economist Ramogi Odhiambo as we look into this afternoon. He's mentioned that there's not necessarily a defunding of agriculture, for example, as an important sector, but just ensuring that the needed resources go towards sector growing indicators. How do you see that playing out?
Well, I am glad that he acknowledged that agriculture is a big employer, has great capacity to create employment and to create a multiplier effect across the country everywhere. Kenya is a signatory to the Malabo Declaration that requires that agriculture take at least 10% of our budget. Our budget is 4.8 trillion, so that means at least 480 billion should go into agriculture. Their budgeted allocation to agriculture is around 170. And his claim is that agriculture is highly devolved. Now, the challenge is even the whole amount going to the devolved functions is less than the 480, is around the 480. So are you anticipating that the county governments will put 100% of all their money in agriculture? Absolutely not. And so then if they are keen on empowering agriculture, then let them increase the devolved function, the money going to the devolved units, so that there is clarity that of the amount coming to the devolved functions, this is specifically for agriculture to enable us to, align with the Malabo Declaration. So that is not clear from his explanations.
All right. Ramogi, Odhiambo, thank you very much for
thank you
analysis
for having
of this.
Me in the Situation Room.
Of course, this is the Situation Room and looking to what that will look like this afternoon. And I know that all ears are peeled, eyes are peeled there as well. Our coverage in depth of the budget 2026-2027 continues. It's in the Situation Room and on KTN this morning.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.